Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing my top 10 favorite dark romances that feature completely unhinged heroes. Alright guys, so I put together this list of 10 dark romance books that all feature heroes that are completely unhinged. I am talking walking red flags. They are either psychopaths, sociopaths. All these books really have a hurt her and you die type feeling to them. And I realized it's one of my favorite type of tropes. It's one of my favorite type of heroes. I just love a somewhat crazy hero, but he will do anything for his love interest. So I'm very excited to talk about these books with you guys. Now, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about these 10 unhinged heroes. So starting off with Even If It Hurts by Sam Mariano. So this is the book that is responsible for giving me the idea to do this video. This book is wild. It's so hard to describe the plot of this book. So this story is set in high school. We are following Aubrey, and Aubrey's mother has been diagnosed with very aggressive cancer, and her father has left the family. So Aubrey is really just trying to stay afloat, take care of her and her mother, and spend as much time with her mother as possible before she passes away. Now, Aubrey is going to this very elite, very rich high school, and she ends up angering this very popular girl, Anae. Now, Aubrey doesn't do anything that really should invoke the amount of rage Anae has towards her, but for some reason, Anae decides she is going to make Aubrey's life a living hell. So she ends up inviting, or a friend of Anae's ends up inviting Aubrey to a party, and although she doesn't typically go to parties, she does agree to go. And when she gets there, she ends up falling into a pool, she can't swim, and is saved by Aubrey's boyfriend, Dare. Now, Dare is a psychopath, sociopath. He just has no sort of empathy or sympathy for anybody, and so is Anae, the popular girl. So anyway, Anae and Dare decide that they are going to have Dare fake date Aubrey and then completely break her heart. And it's that story. Now, I loved following Dare. I love this story overall. I'm not sure if I would consider, I mean, it is a romance, but also I wasn't sure if I wanted these two people to be together at the end or for Aubrey just to murder Dare at the end. Like, I would have been happy with either outcome, honestly. So overall, I definitely think if you are looking for like a psychotic, unhinged hero, there is no one better than Dare. And next up, we have Hitched by Biel. This book is unbelievably dark. Check all of the trigger warnings. But this is a hitchhiker romance. So we are following this woman who ends up picking up a guy who is hitchhiking, only to find out that that guy is actually an escaped convict who has killed multiple people and is serving multiple life sentences. Now, he has escaped. He ends up holding this girl at gunpoint and wants her to drive him to the border, and it's their romance. And it is a very, very fun, very dark time. And I will say the main character, or the guy, the hero, is super, super touch her and you die towards the end of the book. Prior to that, he's kind of like all for other people touching her. It's a very weird relationship. But overall, I loved this book. I read this in a day, and it was really enjoyable. I will say definitely check out the audiobook. Joe Arden just absolutely kills it as this character, and I can't imagine reading this book physically. The audiobook is just so, so good. But this is really good. Just definitely check the trigger warnings. And next up, we have Stolen Touches, and this is book 5 in the Perfectly Imperfect Mafia romance series. So I will say this main character is probably like the least unhinged out of all of the guys I'm about to talk about. The story is following Milene and Salvatore. So Milene is this woman who is working as a nurse in New York City. Now, her family is part of the Cosa Nostra, and she wants nothing to do with the Mafia, so she did not tell them she is working in New York City. And that is because New York City is being ruled by Salvatore, and he is part of a different, like, Mafia circuit. So anyway, Salvatore ends up finding Milene and finds out that she's related to, I think it's Boston is where her, like, home Mafia family is from, and essentially says either I'm going to kill this girl that's in my territory or I'm going to marry her because he's already kind of interested in her. And it becomes an arranged marriage. Now, Milene really wants to have her own life away from the Mafia. She wants to become a nurse. And Salvatore wants her just to stay at home and do no such thing. So we do find out that Salvatore has killed a lot of people and has a very like stoic personality, and then it comes out that he actually has some sort of anxiety disorder. I don't think it's ever specified exactly what kind of anxiety he has. I know Milene talks about him having OCD, but he denies that. But anyway, he has a lot of anxiety, especially when it comes to Milene, and he just wants her to call him every hour on the hour, and it's their romance, and it is so cute. But also, Salvatore, despite being so sweet to Milene, is honestly a little bit terrifying. Like, he is a scary dude. But overall, I love this series so much and highly, highly recommend. And next up, we have There Are No Saints, which is the first book in a duology by Giana Darling. So this is following Cole and Mara. So Mara is a woman that is part of like the art community. She's a very struggling artist. She's trying to really get her name out there. Then you have Cole. Cole's a sculptor, and he is one of the most famous sculptors in the area that they're living in. And on top of that, he also is a serial killer, but he's like very, very in control all the time, very rigid, so he's never gotten caught. Then we find out there's actually a bunch of sculptor serial killers. By a bunch, I mean at least 2, but that's still more than you would think in the same town. So anyway, one of the sculptor serial killers ends up finding Mara and attacks her and leaves her to be found by Cole for Cole to kill, because they have like a serial killer rivalry going on. But then Cole is very interested in Mara, doesn't kill her, ends up giving her a job, and it is their relationship, and it is something. This is probably one of my favorite duologies by Giana Darling. I love everything that woman writes, but this one was just, it was so dark, but also you can't help but kind of love Cole despite the fact that he is a murderer and he has killed so many people and doesn't really have any sympathy. But overall, this is just a really fun duology, and you're not going to find anyone quite as crazy as Cole. And next up, I had to include Draco Malfoy. So Draco from Manacled, High Reeve Draco is probably the most like unhinged kind of crazy Draco, but most of the fanfiction Dracos I feel like are a little bit toucher and you die vibe. I know the Draco in Love in a Time of a Zombie Apocalypse isn't quite as intense as this Draco, but still is very like, I love Hermione, everyone else can like suck it. So I love all the Hermione fanfiction I've read so far, but this one in particular, Manacled, is where I started with fanfiction, and it is perfection, by SenlinYu. So this is following Hermione, and it's essentially what would have happened if Voldemort won the war against the Order of the Phoenix and Harry Potter was killed. So Hermione ends up being put into isolation by Professor Umbridge, where she is cut off from any sort of like light, sound, and is completely deprived until she is released and finds out that she is going to be part of Voldemort's breeding program. Because for some reason magical pureblood power is waning, they've decided that Hermione is going to be bred with High Reeve, and we find out the High Reeve is actually Draco Malfoy. So she's brought to Malfoy Manor, where she is supposed to be impregnated with Draco's child, and the story goes from there. So it is like Handmaid's Tale meets Harry Potter, and it is super, super dark, including, besides like the essay and stuff that kind of goes with the Handmaid's Tale, there's also like graphic violence that's depicted on page, so just make sure you know all of the triggers before going into this. But overall, I absolutely adored this book, and oh my gosh, this Draco is so intense, but also just so, so good. So I have a vlog of me reading this for the first time. It's spoiler and spoiler free, so I do say some spoilers, but there's a spoiler warning on the page anytime I do so. So I will leave that in the cards and in the description, but definitely check out any sort of Hermione fanfic when you can. They're so good. And of course, I had to include Zade Meadows on this list. So this is Haunting Adeline, which is the first book in the Cat and Mouse Duet by H.D. Carlton. So I loved this first book. The second book, Hunting Adeline, was just a little bit too dark for me. But this book is following Addie, and she ends up moving into her recently deceased grandmother's like dilapidated house, and when she gets there, she soon feels like she's being watched. Well, we find out she is being watched by a vigilante stalker named Zade, and Zade just becomes completely fascinated by Addie and starts breaking into her house, and it's called the Cat and Mouse Duet for a reason. So he essentially is just Addie's prey and he is the predator, and he pretty much just like chases her throughout the house. They have a bunch of spicy time, and Addie realizes that she really can't get rid of this guy, and eventually it becomes a romance, and it goes from there. So like I said, this first book is really dark, but also I love the romance. I just thought, I don't know, something about Zaid is just so good. The second book takes a much darker turn, and that's hard to even picture when you read this book because this book is pretty dark. But the second book deals a little bit more with like SA and trafficking, and it's just a really dark story. But overall, if you're looking for a super dark romance and looking for a stalker to fall head over heels in love with, definitely check out Haunting Adeline. And next up, we have Dead Man Walking, and this is book 5 in the Follow Men series by Giana Darling. So this is my absolute favorite motorcycle club series. I have a full spoiler-free series review that I'll leave in the cards and in the description. But this is my third favorite book in the series, and it is so good. We are following Priest and Bea. So Bea is this sweet girl. She lives a very privileged life, and everyone considers her like this sweet, adorable princess that's like very naive. But really, Bea is obsessed with true crime. She actually runs a true crime podcast, and is just obsessed with like the dark and disturbed and things like that. And she also has a huge crush on Priest. Now, Priest is the hitman for the fallen MC, and he was raised in Ireland. He had a horrible upbringing. He has a very difficult past. And because of everything he went through, he's pretty much like shut off emotionally, which makes him very good at killing people. So anyway, Bea is driving home from a Halloween party with this guy that she was talking to, and her car gets blown up. And it turns out the person that blew up her car was actually Priest. So Priest ends up saving Bea, and then a romance soon ensues. Now, it's actually really funny because everyone in Bea's family is like, yo, you need to stay away from that guy. Like, we love him, but he's crazy. And Bea's like, but I like him. And they end up getting together, and it's just so good. I love the dynamic between the two of them just because Priest is so quiet and so kind of shut off, and Bea is just very, not outgoing, but it's really sweet to see these two interact and in a relationship. So overall, like I said, this is one of my favorite books in the Follow Men series, and if you have not read that series yet, you definitely need to pick it up. And next up, we have Promises and Pomegranates, and this is by Salve R. Miller. So this is a Mafia romance. It's considered a Hades and Persephone retelling. I wouldn't call it that. I would say this has a couple nods to Hades and Persephone, but other than that, it's very different. But we are following Elena, and she is a woman in the Mafia. I think her father is like a dom or something like that. And Cal is her bodyguard. Now, Elena has had a huge crush on Cal, but Cal is known for just being a complete psychopath that has his emotions essentially shut down and kills everyone without any sort of remorse. But he does have a soft spot for Elena, so it is their romance when Cal is put in charge of guarding Elena. And that's all I really remember. It's been, like I said, years since I read this, but overall, I just remember Cal being absolutely insane, but also loving him because he did have those, like, touch her and you die type vibes, which sometimes I'm just in the mood for, and they're awesome. So definitely check this out if you're looking for a spicy Mafia romance. And next up, we have King of Flesh and Bone, and this is by Liv Zander. So this copy was kindly sent to me from Jen for the Book Refuge for my birthday, and it came just in time because she sent me this. I think I got this yesterday, and now I'm filming this video. But anyway, this is the first book in a dark fantasy duology, and it is a wild time. So we are following this woman who lives in a world where corpses don't just kind of dissolve, they actually reanimate and plague Earth because the King of Flesh and Bone has decided he's over humans and just kind of wanted to mess with them. So our main character is trying to get a body back into the ground, and something ends up happening, and she ends up being dragged by a zombie horse / donkey into the land of the dead, where she's not supposed to be, so she immediately starts to kind of like disintegrate. But then the King of Flesh and Bone is like, hey, human, you're not supposed to be here, but I like you, you're gonna be my plaything. So he ends up like putting the spell on her where she's able to survive, but he just kind of like essays her and does horrible, really bad things to her and won't let her leave. And she attempts to leave multiple times, and he kind of just breaks her legs and is like never remorseful about breaking her legs. He's like, well, if you didn't try to run away, I wouldn't have had to break your legs. So it is a wild duology, and I will say the main guy in this, he never is really redeemed. He never feels remorse about any of the horrible things he does. It's really just the woman slowly realizing that people kind of do suck and agreeing with him. And that's pretty much the story. But if you're looking for a very fun and spicy time, I would definitely check out The King of Flesh and Bone and the second book. And last up, we have That Sick Love by Jessie Hall. So the audiobook for this recently came out over the summer, and I read this as part of a collab vlog with Cheyenne from the channel That Tall Book Girl. So I'll leave that video linked in the cards and in the description. But this book is super dark, super twisty, kind of has like Amo Jones type vibes. So we're following this girl, Bryony, who lives in this very like religious institution. Everyone in her family is super religious, as well as like all of her friends. So she ends up having a baptism of sorts, and during that she is almost killed. So right away she ends up kind of being like skeptical of some of the people around her, and then she ends up being stalked. And we find out she is being stalked by Arrow. Arrow is a psychopath. He had a very traumatic and upsetting upbringing, and he's just kind of a psychopath. Once again, very little empathy, very little sympathy, and just really, he's a little bit unhinged. Oh, he's a lot unhinged. But anyway, he ends up stalking Bryony and then decides that he actually really likes her and wants her to fight for herself. So while stalking her, he's also trying to kind of like empower her to be able to stand up against the church. And the story really goes from there. Like I said, this is super, super twisty. I wasn't a huge fan of it when I read it. For some reason, I just really couldn't get into the story. But I do know a lot of people absolutely adore this book and love this author's writing. So if you're a fan of dark romance and you haven't read this yet and you're looking for like a stalker type vibe, definitely check out That Sick Love. Alright guys, those are 10 of my favorite dark romances that feature completely unhinged heroes. Please let me know down in the comments below if there are any other books or dark romance books that have a similar type feel. I love getting recommendations from you guys. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!